Imagine this for a second. You're on vacation. You're in Puerto Rico. The sun is just beating down. You can feel that thick Caribbean humidity on your skin. And you're in a cab heading back to your hotel.
Total relaxation mode.
Totally. You're sun-drenched. You're not thinking about anything. And then you get to the hotel, and the driver looks you dead in the eye and says it's $3.
Okay.
But you know for a fact, because you've done this exact trip before, that it's supposed to be $1.50.
Oh, that feeling. I know that feeling. It's that immediate hot flash of indignation.
Exactly. You're steaming mad. You're arguing. You're feeling that really specific prickly heat of being totally ripped off.
And it just ruins the whole vibe, doesn't it? The vacation mood is just gone.
It's gone.
Right.
Now imagine that at that exact moment, thousands of miles away in a snowy living room in Elmira, New York, a woman is sitting in a trance.
Okay.
Her voice is dropped, like a full octave. Her eyes are black, and she is describing your anger, the $3 fare, and even like the texture of the driver's neck.
Chills. That's the kind of thing that makes the hair on the back of your neck just stand right up.
Right.
It suggests the world is, I don't know, a lot more porous and maybe a lot more crowded than we usually give it credit for.
It really does. And that is exactly where we're going today. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are settling in for what feels to me like a late-night campfire chat about the structural integrity of the entire universe.
A small topic, then.
Just a small one. We are looking at a very specific, very strange, and honestly, a very funny slice of history.
We are diving deep into session 218 of the early sessions, book 5 of the Seth material. And this session was recorded way back on December 15th, 1965. It's just a fascinating window into the early days of this whole phenomenon.
And it's published by the New Awareness Network. We always want to give a shout out to the people who are keeping these massive archives alive and accessible. And before we go any further, I just have to do the mandatory disclaimer. This deep dive will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We're here to learn, to explore, and to have our minds bent a little.
And the mission for this particular deep dive feels, well, it feels unique. I mean, usually when people talk about philosophy or the nature of time, which is our big topic today, it gets so dry.
So academic.
Yeah, exactly. It's diagrams on a dusty chalkboard.
Yeah.
But today we are talking about a ghost or technically an energy personality essence.
Right.
Who isn't just lecturing, he's cracking jokes, he's correcting physicists. And like you said, he is effectively spying on people's vacations in the Caribbean and their business trips to Washington, D.C.
That, for me, is the aha hook. Because you usually get one or the other. You get the high-level mind-bending theory that challenges how you see reality, or you get the ghost story.
And this is both.
This is both. We have a disembodied voice explaining the physics of time and then turning around and proving it by knowing about a repulsive man at a seminar in D.C. before the person attending even meets him.
And it all comes back to that central theme of the session, time, but not the time on your watch, not clock time.
No.
We're talking about the concept that you, your past self, your future self, and even versions of you that you don't even know exist are all kind of hanging out together in what someone calls a spacious present.
I love that phrase, the spacious present. It sounds so inviting, like a living room with enough chairs for everyone you've ever been.
It is a gift in a way. The idea that time isn't this narrow tightrope we're all walking, where one wrong step and you just fall off into nothingness.
Right.
It's a vast field that we're standing in. And in this session, Seth is, he's ready for a showdown. He's stepping into the ring with some of the heavyweight thinkers of the 1960s.
So let's set that scene. It's December of '65. Jane Roberts, who is the channel for Seth, and her husband, Robert, but Seth calls them Ruburt and Joseph, they are deep in this whole experiment. And Jane has been reading. She's been hitting the books, trying to find some kind of framework for what is happening to her every week.
Right. And she's been reading a book called Man in Time by J.B. Priestley. And through that book, she's learning about another theorist named J.W. Dunne.
And she's excited about it.
Oh, she's buzzing.
Yeah.
Because she thinks she's found these incredible similarities between what these guys are theorizing and what Seth has been telling her for months.
So is she thinking like, I caught him borrowing ideas, or is it more of a relief for her?
It's pure validation. It's her thinking, hey, real intellectuals are talking about this too. I'm not just making all of this up in my head. She's looking for a lifeline to sanity,
Of course.
But when Seth comes through in this session, he has a lot of personality about it. He doesn't just say, yes, that's a good book.
No, his entrance is just perfect. He says, and I'm quoting here, Priestley is indeed the Priestley fellow, and Dunne is far from done, if you will forgive my jest.
The puns. You have to love a multidimensional entity that loves a good or maybe a bad pun.
It really humanizes him, or I guess entities him. It just establishes right away that he's not some robot. He's a personality.
But he's also setting a boundary there, isn't he? He's making it clear, I didn't borrow these ideas from them.
Yes.
Exactly. He actually says he's glad Jane didn't read these books earlier so nobody could accuse him of plagiarism. His claim is basically that while Priestley and Dunne are trying to describe the house from the outside, peering through the windows with binoculars.
Seth is already inside.
Seth is living inside the house. He exists outside of the very time structures they are struggling to theorize about.
Okay, so let's unpack the theory he's critiquing then. What was Priestley's big idea, his concept of the three times? Because Seth spends a lot of energy taking this apart, so we need to know what he's arguing against.
Okay, let's break it down. Priestley was a brilliant guy, and he breaks time into 3 dimensions to try and solve this riddle of existence. So, time 1 is what we all know.
The everyday.
Normal chronological tick-tock time. You're born, you go to school, you work, you die. It's a straight line. It's rigid.
Simple enough. The daily grind. The arrow of time that only points in one direction.
Then you have time 2. For Priestley, this is the perspective of the dream state or the subconscious, and it's much more fluid.
Right, in dreams you can jump all over the place.
Exactly. You're not bound by the clock. You can revisit your childhood or experience things completely out of order. Priestley saw this as like a higher dimension of time that intersects with our daily life.
Yeah, it could be 10 years old one second and 40 the next. It's very slippery.
Precisely. And then there's time 3. For Priestley, time 3 is the post-death state. It's the ultimate release from the rigidity of time 1. But this is where Seth has a major problem with Priestley's theory.
Okay, so what's the beef? Why does Seth think Priestley gets it so wrong at the end?
Priestley suggests that when you get to time 3, basically, when you die, you effectively lose your individuality. You merge into this great big blob of life force.
Like a drop of water returning to the ocean.
That's the perfect analogy for it. You're there, but the you that was you isn't you anymore. It's a very Nirvana-like concept, but in a way that basically erases the self.
And Seth doesn't agree with that.
Oh, yeah.
Which is interesting, because that sounds like a fairly standard spiritual take,
Mm-hmm.
We are all one and all that.
He disagrees, and he disagrees vehemently. Seth argues that consciousness never loses its identity. He thinks Priestley just stops too short. In Seth's view, you don't become a generic battery for the universe. You stay you.
Expanded, I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah, expanded, sure. More aware, absolutely. But you don't just dissolve.
He uses a really beautiful image to explain it. He says, the flame feeds the fire and the fire feeds the flame.
It's such a profound distinction. Priestley sees the life force as something that, fills you up and then you get dumped back out. But Seth sees us as actual portions of that life force.
So we are the fuel in the fire.
Yes. And if you lose the individual consciousnesses, the individual flames, the whole fire goes out. The universe needs our individuality. It's not a flaw to be overcome. It's the entire point of the exercise.
That's actually really comforting. The idea that I don't just get turned into, cosmic soup at the end of all this. My meanness is actually important.
And it puts the responsibility back on the individual, too. Your growth matters because it feeds the whole. You aren't just a passenger on this ride. You're part of the engine.
Okay, so that's Priestley. Then we got this other guy, Dunne. And his theory sounds like a headache waiting to happen, this serialism thing. Can you explain that without melting my brain?
I will do my best. So Dunne's concept is known as the infinite regress. Think of it like this. If you are observing time 1, you're sitting there watching the clock tick on the wall, there has to be a you that is doing the observing, right?
Okay, yeah, the observer. I'm watching the clock. Makes sense.
But then Dunne asks, who is observing that observer who is observing the clock?
Yeah.
So you need a second observer to watch the first one, and then a third to watch the second. And it goes on forever in a straight line. An infinite conga line of observers watching observers, stretching all the way back into eternity.
That sounds absolutely exhausting and kind of like standing between two mirrors where your reflection just repeats forever.
Seth thinks so too. He says Dunne ended up in a frenzy because he got trapped in his own logic. He built this perfect, inescapable trap for himself.
So how does Seth correct it?
Seth's correction is simple. He just says, look, you don't stay in a straight line forever. Eventually, the selves merge, They synthesize.
This is that Gestalt idea he talks about.
Yes, the entity. You don't have an infinite line of separate cells stretching back forever. You have a family of cells that eventually wake up and realize they're all part of one greater consciousness. It's not a line, it's a circle or maybe a sphere, a Gestalt. The observers stop just watching each other and realize they were all the same thing looking out of different windows.
Which brings us right to the big mind-bending reveal in the next section. Because Jane, or Rupert's trying to figure out who Seth is in relation to all of this. She's sitting there wondering, okay, is Seth just my number 6 self from the future?
It's the logical next question, right? If Dunne says we have these higher observers, maybe Seth is just Jane's higher self calling down from a few rungs up the ladder. It would explain why he knows so much.
And Seth's answer is that classic, frustrating, well, yes, but also no.
It's complicated. He explains that he communicates through layers of Jane's own subconscious, what he calls the third undifferentiated level. He admits that he stands in a position similar to a number 6 self. He has access to knowledge of her other selves, but he isn't just a future version of her in a straight line.
And then he drops the bombshell. The one that made me actually stop the recording and rewind it.
Yeah.
He says that he, Jane, and her husband Robert are all part of the same entity.
It's a massive, massive moment in the cosmology of this material. He just says it so casually we are actually, you see, part of the same entity now.
And the note in the transcript says, Jane actually laughs during the trance when he says this.
It is funny in a cosmic sort of way. Here they are sitting in their living room in Elmira. Jane thinks she's talking to some separate ghost from history. Robert is dutifully taking notes like a stenographer.
And Seth is just like, hey guys, you don't realize yet, but we're all just fingers on the same hand.
That is the perfect analogy. That's the one that helps me really get it. Think of your hand. Jane is the thumb. Robert is the index finger. Seth is, I don't know, maybe the palm or the whole hand itself.
Right. And to the thumb, the index finger looks like a completely separate object. They can touch, they can move independently, but if you trace them back, they are rooted in the exact same source.
Exactly. They feel separate, but they are the same thing. And it implies they aren't just communicating with some wise teacher, they are communicating with a larger part of their own collective soul family. It just breaks down that barrier between human and spirit.
Which changes the whole dynamic. It's not teacher and student anymore. It's part and whole. It's basically Seth saying, I'm you, just with a much better view.
And that view is what lets him do all the crazy things we see in the rest of the session. Because once you establish that time isn't linear and we're all connected in this spacious present, then things like clairvoyance or remote viewing, they're not magic.
They're just looking across the hand.
Yeah, just looking across the hand to see what the other finger is doing.
Speaking of which,
Yeah.
let's get to the spooky stuff. The verification. Because all this philosophy is great, but if you can't prove it, it's just a bunch of nice words.
And Seth, or maybe more accurately, Jane and Robert, were very keen on proof. They didn't just want to talk about it, they wanted to test it. They were constantly running these little experiments to validate that this wasn't just Jane's overactive imagination.
So we shift gears here into section 3, the envelope tests. Can you explain for everyone how this worked?
Sure. It was a protocol they set up specifically to test clairvoyance. Robert would take an item, a letter, a drawing, some random object, and seal it inside a double envelope.
Double sealed.
Right, so no peeking. He wouldn't tell Jane what it was. And then Jane, while in trance as Seth, would hold the envelope up to her forehead and just describe what was inside.
And in this particular session, the atmosphere itself seemed charged before they even started the test.
It really was. Robert makes a specific note in the transcript that when he lit the test candle that night, the flame shot up 3 inches.
3 inches? That's not a candle, that's a torch.
He'd never seen it do that before. It was like a physical manifestation of the energy that was building up in the room. And then Seth gets to work on the envelope.
And the hit was a letter from Robert's mother. But he doesn't just come out and say it's a letter from your mom. He gets these weird, specific, structural details first.
Right. He picks up a framework, which Robert later identifies as the border on the postage stamp. You remember those old stamps with the really defined, ornate borders?
Oh, yeah.
He also picks up something square, which was the folded envelope itself. He's seeing the geometry of it first.
But then he gets more abstract. He says there's a connection with a missionary.
This is where it gets so fascinating to watch the psychic mind work, because Robert's brother's father-in-law is a retired minister. So there is a direct clergy connection in the family web that's mentioned in that letter.
Okay.
But then Seth also mentions a monk, which apparently triggers an association for Jane about a friend of theirs who is a monk.
So it's like a game of telepathic telephone. The energy of the letter contains the concept of clergy. Seth picks that up. His part of the consciousness translates it as missionary, and then Jane's brain hears missionary and thinks, oh, monk.
Exactly. It shows that this isn't a fax machine spitting out a perfect copy. It's an interpretive act. The raw data comes in, and the medium's brain has to scramble to find the closest file folder to put it in. It just highlights how difficult it is to translate non-physical information into physical speech. It's an art, not a hard science.
He also mentions a connection with an animal. What was that about?
And this was verified. Jane herself saw a stray dog during the specific visit that was being discussed in the letter, a specific memory that was attached to the event the letter was about.
So he's not just reading the ink on the page, he's reading the associations that are attached to the object.
Which is such a key distinction. In the Seth worldview, objects aren't just dead matter, they're psychic sponges. They hold the energy and memories of the people who handle them. So a letter carries the emotions of the writer and the psychic residue of the events it describes.
That is slightly terrifying if you think about some of the junk drawers in my house. But, okay, let's move to the main event here. The remote viewing. This is where the rubber really meets the road.
The Gallaghers.
Yes, Bill and Peggy Gallagher.
Yeah.
They were friends of Jane and Robert. They go on vacation to Puerto Rico, and they tell Jane and Robert nothing.
Zero. Absolute radio silence. They want to see if Seth can track them across the ocean.
And boy, does he track them. This is section 4. Seth provides these impressions while they are away. And some of these hits are they're so wonderfully mundane, which makes them feel more real to me.
The mundane details are always the most convincing. If he'd said, I see them having a spiritual epiphany on a mountaintop, that's so vague, anybody can have an epiphany.
Right.
But let's look at the specific hits he gets.
Okay. The hotel. Seth says he sees a bushy sort of tree with something like spikes outside a rear corner window.
Validated. There was a palm-like tree with spiky leaves right outside their rear window. Not the front window, the rear one. The detail is so specific.
Then the casino. Seth sees dice, an old man, and jewelry.
This one is great. Bill confirmed he was standing at a roulette table. Standing right next to him was a man about 60 years old. And what was this man wearing? 3 rings.
3 rings? Who wears 3 rings to a casino?
A man who wants to be noticed by a psychic entity, apparently. Such a specific visual. Old man, jewelry, dice. Check, check, and check.
And then, my absolute favorite, the cab ride.
The infamous $3 fare.
Seth says he sees a $3 fare, which seems large, and an angry reaction.
And Bill and Peggy confirmed it. They were furious. The fare was always $1.50. They got charged double for no reason. And that anger, that huge spike of emotion, that's a beacon.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Does strong emotion act like a signal booster for this kind of thing?
It absolutely seems to. Seth often locks on to things that carry a really strong emotional charge. Anger, fear, shock, surprise. Getting ripped off by a cabbie is a universal high-emotion event. It stamps itself on the timeline much harder than just, sitting peacefully on a beach.
Then there's the snorkeling incident. Seth sees Bill underwater. He sees a mask, but no tank.
Confirmed. Bill was snorkeling, not scuba diving. Simple but accurate.
And then Seth adds this creepy little detail. He says he sees a small white skull.
And Bill reported that while he was down there, he was looking at fish skeletons on the ocean bottom. Small white skeletal structures. Skulls.
Incredible. It's literally like Seth is looking right through Bill's eyes.
Or accessing Bill's memory of the event as it's being formed in the spacious present.
There was one near miss, though, right? The white towel.
Yeah, that's a great one. Seth asks if Bill splashed Peggy while she was lying on a white towel, and Peggy confirmed she did have a white towel, but she said, no, Bill didn't splash me.
I almost like the near misses more than the direct hits.
Oh, yeah? Why is that?
Because it shows it's not a script. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
It feels like someone trying to see through a foggy window. You can make out the towel. You can see the water, so you assume a splash must have happened. It makes the whole process feel more authentic to the struggle of communication.
It does. It shows that interpretive layer again. Seth sees the raw elements, white towel, water, Bill, Peggy, and his consciousness constructs a probable narrative that is 90% right, but just misses the specific action.
Okay, so that was Puerto Rico. But then Peggy goes to Washington, D.C., and this is section 5. And this is where the vibe shifts from, fun vacation tracking to genuinely spooky spying.
Yeah, this is the seminar on poverty. Peggy goes to D.C. for work, and Seth gives predictions before she even leaves, and then gives more impressions while she's actually there.
Let's start with the repulsive man,
This one is so visceral. Seth predicts that she will meet a man she does not like.
which on its own is pretty vague. I mean, we all meet people we don't like.
True. But Peggy confirmed that she met a specific black-haired man that she found repulsive and upsetting. Not just annoying, repulsive. Again, it's that powerful emotional reaction that Seth just locks onto like a heat-seeking missile.
And then the taxi symbol. This is one of the most specific visual hits in the entire session. It's wild.
It is. Seth describes a white taxicab, but he focuses on a symbol on the door. He says it's round, dark against a white background, and it depicts figures or object shapes.
And the reality?
DC cabs at the time were white, and the logo on the door was the Capitol Dome, a semicircular dome shape, dark against white.
That is just, it's insane. He's seeing the logo on the door of the cab she's about to get into.
And then there's the handkerchief.
Oh, the pointed handkerchief. I love this one.
Seth sees a man with a pointed handkerchief in his breast pocket. Peggy recalls a specific man who had his pocket square folded with 4 sharp points showing, and she noted it at the time because it was so unusual. It wasn't the standard square fold you usually see.
It's these tiny little oddities. If you were just guessing, you wouldn't guess 4-pointed handkerchief. You'd guess man in a gray suit or something generic.
Exactly. It's the specific deviations from the norm that act as the best proof of a real connection.
There was also a prediction of a disturbance, right? At a conference.
Yep. Seth predicts a disturbance at a press conference, and lo and behold, a group from Syracuse interrupts Sergeant Shriver, who was running the poverty program at the time, and causes a huge scene. It made the papers.
And he even picked up on Bill's ulcer back home at the same time.
Poor Bill.
Yeah.
Seth mentions that the Jesuits, that's his funny nickname for Bill, his ulcer is bothering him that evening, and Bill actually had to call a doctor that specific night because the pain got so bad.
So we have remote viewing of the wife hundreds of miles away in D.C. and remote diagnosis of the husband back in Elmira, all in the same breath.
It really demonstrates that spacious present concept in action. Distance doesn't matter. Physical space is no barrier. It's all accessible from that higher vantage point.
So, Section 6. The philosophy of predictions. Let's tie it all together. How is he doing this? If it's not guessing and it's not magic, what's the actual mechanism here?
It goes right back to that first section we talked about, the spacious present. Seth isn't guessing the future. He is looking at the broad present.
Explain that distinction for me, because I'm still picturing a timeline on a whiteboard, but you're saying that's the wrong model.
Totally the wrong model. Imagine you're in a helicopter and you're looking down at a winding mountain road. From up there, you can see the car. That's you, in your present moment.
Okay.
You can see the stretch of road the car just came from. That's the past. And you can see the rock slide that's waiting for it around the next bend. That's the future. To the driver in the car, the rock slide hasn't happened yet. They have no idea it's coming. But to you, the helicopter pilot, it's all part of the same single landscape.
So Seth is in the helicopter.
Precisely. He sees the potentiality of the events already unfolding. He sees the repulsiveness of the man in D.C. before Peggy meets him, because in that broader landscape, the meeting is already part of the terrain. It's not prediction in the magical sense, it's observation from a higher altitude.
And he does all of this with such a sense of humor. We have to talk about the nicknames he uses.
Oh, they're great. He calls Peggy the cat lover.
Which was accurate, I assume.
Very accurate. And he calls Bill the Jesuit, or sometimes the monk.
Why? Was Bill a priest?
No, but apparently he just had this very studious, maybe slightly ascetic vibe that Seth found endlessly amusing. It just shows that Seth isn't some cold, disembodied computer. He has relationships with these people. He teases them.
He even makes that joke about the food. It is better to eat turkey than crow.
Which is, let's be honest, a classic dad joke.
Right.
But it grounds the whole experience. It makes this ghost feel like a friend who just happens to be dead and, omniscient.
So let's wrap this up. We've covered a ton of ground. We started with this heavy intellectual showdown between Seth, Priestley, and Dunne. We realized that time isn't a straight line and that we don't just dissolve into nothingness.
And we discovered that we're all part of a massive soul gestalt, an entity where we are all connected like fingers on a hand.
And then we went and proved it, or at least Seth provided some seriously compelling evidence, by remotely viewing a $3 cab ride, a snorkeling trip, and a chaotic press conference in Washington, D.C.
It's a perfect synthesis of the high-minded philosophy and the nitty-gritty verifiable details. And I think that's the real power of the Seth material. It doesn't ask you to leave your brain at the door. It asks you to bring your brain, your skepticism, and your sense of humor along for the ride.
So what does this all mean for someone listening right now? Why should they care about a single session from 1965?
I think it matters because it challenges the most fundamental way we view our lives. If Seth is right, our private lives aren't nearly as private as we think. We're part of this much larger interconnected web of consciousness. You are never, ever really alone. You are part of an entity.
That's both comforting and also means I should probably behave a little better when I think no one's watching.
Or at least realize that your internal thoughts and feelings might be broadcasting a lot louder than you think.
Exactly. And hey, if you want to dive deeper into this yourself, because we have only scratched the very, very top layer of what Seth has to say, you really need to go to the source.
Absolutely. We always encourage you to go straight to the material. Visit sethcenter.com/the early sessions. That's sethcenter.com/the early sessions. Get the books, read the transcripts for yourself. There's nothing like reading it in Seth's own voice or Jane's interpretation of it.
And a huge credit again to the Seth Material and the New Awareness Network for making all of this available.
And remember, this deep dive is just one drop in a massive bucket. There are volumes and volumes of this stuff.
So I want to leave you with one final thought. We talked about the spacious present. We talked about how the past, the present, and the future are all kind of existing at the same time.
Right.
So if time isn't a straight line, what are you doing in your spacious present right now? What is your number 6 self seeing when they look down at your life? Are you the angry tourist in the cab? Or are you the one who's in on the joke?
That is a question worth meditating on for a while.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
See you in the next spacious moment.
And as always, this deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. Stay curious.